A tan 1968 Volkswagen Beetle, the same car your mom probably thought was adorable, was used to kidnap and murder at least 30 women across 4 American states. The killer ripped out the passenger seat, removed the inside door handle, and handcuffed his victims to the car frame so they could not escape. But that Beetle is only one of 5 cars on this list that went from ordinary machines to permanent crime scenes. And 3 of them are now parked side by side in the same museum in Tennessee, which tells you something deeply wrong about what we are drawn to. One of the cars in this list was never even found, and the one at number 1 was watched live by 95 million people at the same time. The 1934 Ford Model 40B 4-door Deluxe. Clyde loved Ford V8 so much that he allegedly wrote a fan letter to Henry Ford himself on April 10, 1934, calling the car a dandy and bragging that he drove Fords exclusively. That letter is still on display at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, and it came from the most wanted man in America, whose every Ford was stolen during a robbery or a killing. The 85-horsepower flathead V8 could outrun every cop car on the road because police were still stuck in Ford Model A's that could barely crack 45 miles per hour. But on May 23, 1934, Bonnie and Clyde's luck died on Louisiana State Highway 154 near Sales. 6 officers led by retired Texas Ranger Frank Hammer had been tracking the couple for 102 days and set up an ambush based on a tip from former gang member Henry Methvin, who betrayed them for leniency. The car they were driving that morning was a stolen Ford 4-door Deluxe, taken from a woman named Ruth Warren in Topeka, Kansas just weeks before. Ruth had picked that car because she thought it was beautiful, a Cordoba gray sedan with leather seats and polished bumper guards. She never saw it again until it was returned to her full of bullet holes and blood. When the couple rolled up that morning, the officers opened fire and pumped approximately 130 rounds into the sedan. One of the first bullets hit Clyde in the head, and Bonnie died screaming as the gray Ford turned into a coffin on wheels. That bullet-riddled death car became an instant traveling carnival attraction, with operators charging people to stare at the blood dried into the seats. Almost a century later, it still sits on display at the Prim Valley Resort and Casino in Nevada. However, Bonnie and Clyde were far from the only criminals whose car became more famous than the crime. And the next one on this list involved a vehicle so ordinary that police drove right past it dozens of times, while the killers inside were murdering people through a hole in the trunk. The 1990 Chevrolet Caprice. In October 2002, a 41-year-old Army veteran named John Allen Muhammad and his 17-year-old accomplice Lee Boyd Malvo terrorized the entire Washington, D.C. area for 23 straight days, using a beat-up dark blue 1990 Chevrolet Caprice and a Bushmaster .223 caliber rifle. They had ripped out the back seat and installed a hinge so a person could crawl from the passenger compartment directly into the trunk. Then they cut a small hole near the license plate, just large enough to slide a rifle barrel through without anyone outside the car noticing a thing. From that position, lying flat inside the trunk of what looked like just another old sedan on the road, one of them would aim at ordinary people and pull the trigger. They killed a mother of 2 pumping gas at a Shell station, an FBI intelligence analyst named Linda Franklin who was shot dead in a Home Depot parking lot on a regular weeknight while shopping with her husband, a woman named Caroline Sewell who was loading bags into her minivan while her children waited inside, and a 13-year-old boy named Iron Brown walking into his middle school. 10 people were murdered and 3 critically injured, and women across the entire D.C. region started ducking and zigzagging at gas stations because standing still in a parking lot felt like a death sentence. The craziest part is that over 30 law enforcement agencies were searching for a white van or box truck based on witness descriptions, while Muhammad and Malvo drove right past police checkpoints in their Caprice without raising a single alarm. D.C. police pulled them over on October 3, 2002, just hours before they killed 72-year-old Pascal Charlotte on Georgia Avenue, and let them go because the computer system showed nothing. The snipers even left a tarot card at one of the crime scenes with the words, "Call me God," scrawled across it. taunting investigators who still had no idea what kind of vehicle they were looking for. The case broke when the snipers called police and claimed responsibility for an earlier robbery in Montgomery, Alabama. A fingerprint from that scene matched Melvo, which led to Muhammad and his registered Caprice. On October 24, 2002, a truck driver spotted the car at a rest stop off Interstate 70 in Maryland and called 911. FBI SWAT surrounded the vehicle at 3:19 in the morning and found both men sleeping inside with the rifle still in the trunk. Muhammad was executed by lethal injection in 2009. But if a car converted into a sniper platform sounds like the darkest entry on this list, the next one might be worse, because the car itself looked so harmless that young women walked right up to it without a second thought. The 1968 Volkswagen Beetle. A tan Volkswagen Beetle is about the least threatening car on earth. Small, slow, and shaped like something from a children's cartoon. But Ted Bundy turned his beige 1968 VW Beetle into one of the most effective killing tools in American criminal history. He ripped out the passenger seat to make room for a body, removed the inside door handle so victims could not open the door from within, and handcuffed unconscious women to the car frame so they could not escape even if they woke up during the drive. Bundy approached young women at college campuses and shopping malls, wearing a fake arm cast or hobbling on crutches, asking for help carrying something to his car. The women who said yes never came home. And the truly sickening part is that Bundy was so charming and clean-cut that even a woman who worked alongside him at a crisis hotline in Seattle, a future true crime author named Ann Rule, could not bring herself to believe he was the killer, even after the physical description and the Volkswagen Beetle matched perfectly. One young woman who did survive was 18-year-old Carol DeRanch from Utah, who fought Bundy off and threw herself out of the moving Beetle after he snapped a handcuff on her wrist and swung a crowbar at her head. She became the first person to identify him in a police lineup, and her testimony helped put him behind bars. Between January 1974 and February 1978, Bundy murdered at least 30 women across Washington, Utah, Colorado, and Florida, and his little Beetle was a vehicle in almost every abduction. On August 16, 1975, a highway patrol officer pulled Bundy over and immediately noticed the missing passenger seat. A search of the car turned up a ski mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, an ice pick, rope, trash bags, and a mask made from pantyhose. Bundy was arrested but released the next day, and he went straight home and scrubbed the car clean. He later sold the Beetle to a teenager, but investigators seized it and found hairs inside matching 3 of his known victims. And in a twist that proves Bundy had some sick fixation on the brand, he was captured for the final time on February 15, 1978, while driving a stolen orange Volkswagen Beetle through Pensacola, Florida. He was executed in 1989, and his original tan Beetle now sits at the Alcatraz East Crime Museum in Tennessee, right next to the car from number 1 on this list. But remember, I mentioned one car on this list was never found. That car belonged to the most famous woman in the world, and its wreckage vanished into a shipping container after the crash that killed her. The 1994 Mercedes-Benz S280. Princess Diana was 36 years old, a mother of 2 young boys named William and Harry, and the most photographed woman on the planet when she climbed into the back seat of a black 1994 Mercedes-Benz S280 outside the Ritz Hotel in Paris, just after midnight on August 31, 1997. She had spent the previous 9 days on a yacht in the Mediterranean with her companion, Dodi Fayed, who sat beside her that night. Bodyguard Trevor Reese-Jones took the front passenger seat, and behind the wheel was Henry Paul, the hotel's head of security, who had been called back from his night off specifically to drive Diana, and whose blood alcohol level was later found to be 3 times the legal limit in France, roughly equivalent to 10 drinks. The plan was to outrun the paparazzi who had been hounding Diana all evening, so Paul took off at high speed through the streets of Paris with a swarm of photographers on motorcycles chasing from behind. At approximately 12:25 in the morning, less than 5 minutes after leaving the hotel and barely 2 miles down the road, the Mercedes entered the Pont de Lama tunnel traveling at roughly twice the posted speed limit. Paul lost control, and the car slammed into the 13th concrete pillar inside the tunnel. Paul and Fayed were killed instantly. Diana was still alive when paramedics reached her, conscious and asking for help, but she had suffered massive internal injuries and died at a Paris hospital a few hours later. Reese Jones was the only survivor, and he later said he had no memory of the crash at all. A British inquest jury in 2008 ruled that Diana and Fayed had been unlawfully killed due to the gross negligence of Henry Paul and the paparazzi vehicles pursuing them. The jury also found that neither Diana nor Fayed had been wearing seatbelts, and that their deaths might have been prevented if they had. The Mercedes itself was supposed to be destroyed after the investigation, but in 2017, a British tabloid reported that the wrecked car was still sitting in a shipping container in a junkyard in Paris, unaccounted for and unsecured. Nobody has confirmed what happened to it since, and that unanswered question is what makes this car different from every other entry on this list, because every other crime car ended up in a museum or on display. Diana's Mercedes simply disappeared. But the next car did not disappear at all. It became the single most watched vehicle in television history, and its story starts with a pair of murders that tore America apart. The 1993 Ford Bronco. On the evening of June 17, 1994, approximately 95 million Americans were supposed to be watching Game 5 of the NBA Finals between the Knicks and the Rockets. Instead, every broadcast network cut away to show a white 1993 Ford Bronco crawling down Interstate 405 in Los Angeles at about 35 miles per hour, trailed by a parade of police cruisers with their lights flashing. Behind the wheel was Al Cowlings, a former NFL player, and in the backseat was his longtime friend O.J. Simpson, holding a loaded gun to his own head. 5 days earlier, Simpson's ex-wife Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman had been found brutally stabbed to death outside Nicole's home in Brentwood. Nicole had called police to the same address multiple times over the years, reporting domestic violence, and photographs of her bruised face had already surfaced in the media before the murders even happened. Simpson was the prime suspect, and earlier that day he was supposed to surrender to police. Instead, he vanished. His lawyers read what sounded like a suicide note on live television, and the LAPD declared him a fugitive. The chase lasted about 90 minutes through 2 counties, while police negotiators begged Simpson not to pull the trigger. People lined freeway overpasses holding signs that read, "Go OJ!" and Domino's Pizza reported one of its busiest days ever because millions of viewers refused to leave their screens long enough to cook. NBC ran a split screen showing the Bronco on one side and the NBA Finals on the other because neither could be ignored. After a standoff at his Brentwood driveway, Simpson surrendered. Officers found a fake beard, a mustache, and his passport inside the vehicle. He was acquitted of the double murder. But Nicole's story and the violence she endured became the centerpiece of a national conversation about domestic abuse that changed how America talked about what happens behind closed doors. The Chase Bronco, which belonged to Cowlings, spent 17 years in a parking garage with barely 20 miles added to the odometer, and now sits at the Alcatraz East Crime Museum in Tennessee, parked right next to Ted Bundy's Beetle. 2 of the most infamous vehicles in American crime history, side by side under fluorescent lights in a tourist town, looking completely harmless. And somewhere in a junkyard in Paris, Diana's Mercedes may still be sitting in a shipping container, unseen and unaccounted for. Cars do not choose their owners and they do not pick their passengers. But once blood is spilled inside one, that machine stops being transportation and becomes evidence, a memorial, and a warning all at once. And the women whose names are attached to these stories, Nicole Brown Simpson, Carol DeRonch, Linda Franklin, Caroline Sewell, Princess Diana, Ruth Warren, and every one of the 30 women Ted Bundy took from this world, are the reason these cars still matter. Not because of the metal and the glass, but because of the lives that were stolen inside them. If this video makes you think twice about the cars sitting in your driveway right now, hit subscribe, because every week we break down the true stories that history tried to bury. That video on screen right now goes even deeper into one of these cases. Click it.